Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Honest HR Nitrous. I'm Bill, the company's expert, and this is the live stream we do a couple of times weekly where we talk about the reality of job search. So if you are searching for a job, you are between jobs, and you have noticed that this process sucks, it's far from perfect, there's a lot of unprofessionalism, lots of stupidity, and lots of negativity to it, you come to the right place. The title of this episode is The Disrespect You'll Face in Every Job Interview and How to Handle It. So we're going to talk about that. But this is primarily a Q&A. So if you are wondering about something, you're trying to struggle with something, let me know in the chat. If you're seeing my face, you should see a chat box somewhere nearby. Get in the chat. Let me know those things, what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about. I will do my best to help you out. That's the whole point of this. This is episode 59 of Honest HR Nitrous. As you know, there is a difference between the theory of how this stuff should work and how it actually does work. Okay, and we see that every day. If you are searching for jobs, if you are looking in the posted job market, you're looking in the hidden job market, you're going to see this, right? So that's what we're here to talk about. Now, I have no agenda. I have no monologue to go into. I'm simply reacting to your questions, what you guys throw in the chat. That's all I'm doing. So let's dive right into it. Angelica is here, says, T men. Awesome. Okay. I'm already really clicking with what you're saying there. Angelica, if you want to elaborate, go right ahead. Amthor says, I have noticed. Yeah, the disrespect. Yeah, I agree. And it comes from all sides. And, it never ceases to amaze me how, as human beings, we tend to more or less get along with people who are like us. They have similar personality, similar background. Accountants tend to get along with accountants. People who pump gas tend to get along with people who pump gas. You know what I mean? People that are similar to us, we tend to be okay at sort of reasonably getting along with each other. But an accountant trying to get along with someone who pumps gas and vice versa, usually you don't see that, right? And that's where a lot of people have a blind spot for. And I'm not discounting myself. I'm saying this applies to all of us. It's something that we all have to work on. But in my experience, never has this been more obvious than when you're dealing with recruiters and hiring managers in job interviews. That's what I would say. Just the nature of that situation, I think, a lot of this stuff really comes to the surface. It's very unfortunate, but it's true. This is something that we see a lot. And in recent times, I mean, I'm sure we've had a certain amount of this always, but in recent times, the level of unprofessionalism and, just lack of decency has really gone up. For example, things like ghosting have become standard, right? You could be dealing with somebody, especially a recruiter, and then bam, they all of a sudden don't return your calls. You can't raise them. That's normal. Like that. It didn't used to be like that, at least not when I started out. That was my perception. That stuff has really come in, and it's just an example of I understand why that is when you see the nature of recruiters' jobs and the constraints they have. I get it, but at the same time, it's like we're just taking another step towards unprofessionalism, not being decent to each other. That plus a lot of the stupidity that you see in general. Guru Prasad is here. Guru Prasad says 12:30 a.m. midnight from India. Hi there. Hey, Guru Prasad, don't let me deprive you of your beauty sleep. We got to take care of ourselves, especially if you are, doing job search, where not only do you need the energy and the brain power to be at your best professionally, but also emotionally, if you're going to be doing job interviews and interacting with all kinds of people that, are less than savory, shall we say. You're going to need all the physical and mental strength you can get. And I wish you all the best. I know there's a lot of people that are in this situation right now, and I really feel for you because some people out there are going to be, they tend to treat you very unprofessionally, and it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, So get in the chat. Let me know what you guys are dealing with. I see there's 24 people here. If you are a subscriber to my channel, let me know what's up. Let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. I will do my best to help you out. Excellent. Curran is here. Curran says, hi there. Good to be back today. Well, it's good to have you, Curran. Thank you for being here. Let me know what's up with you. Guru Prasad says, question. Is there a better way to know the official email ID of the hiring manager? There are patterns made available. Rocket Reach? Is that like I've never heard of that. Is that like a website that will sell you information or provide information? There's a bunch of websites. There's always been a bunch of websites. Things like Glassdoor, Payscale, even like salary.com. Those would be traditionally the three places you'd go for salary information, but they'd also sort of moonlight in other areas. And one of those was, I believe, where they would give you contact information for different companies, right? I know Google Maps kind of does that, right? And then there's other sites that will try and sell you that information, right? Including, what was the company? There's a big company. Years ago, when I was a manager, we paid a lot of money to a company. I initiated it to get a lot of business information, business intelligence. It turned out to not be very valuable. You know what I mean? So, there's some varying stuff. But the better way, okay, so to answer your question is what I'd recommend for a lot of people, okay, is LinkedIn. Now, I've done this before. Let's just do it again. Let's see if we can, I'll bring up a browser window here. Okay. Right, I'll do a screen share. And let's see where this goes. Okay. So name me a city. We're talking India, right? I've never done this before. So I don't know, what might be a city? Let's see. Bangalore. I have no idea. Okay. So let's go to Google Maps. Right? Now, I may be at a disadvantage here because I don't speak Hindi, but this is the idea. So you've got, I'll see if I can just make that smaller. There we go. So you've got a map of your hometown, okay? And then you've got this box up here, right? Now, Guru Prasad, I don't know what industry you're in, but let's pretend you were in graphic design, okay? Or something, just name something so graphic design, right? Okay. Well, bam. You see on the map, you start getting these dots appearing, right? Now I'm going to zoom in. Okay. Now maybe you're in a quadrant of the city, you're in a part of the city. Let's say the south end here. Okay. Now, you've already got a couple of places here. You see there's a couple of things. Mr. Creative Graphic Designer. Okay. Now if I click this button here, search this area. Okay, you will hopefully get more. Okay, here's a few more. So Sparrow Designs, right? Urban Creative Designing and Digital Marketing Agency. So, okay, let's pretend I was a graphic designer and I was looking for, a bunch of employers near me that I had potential to work for. They were hiring graphic designers, presumably, okay? Or they have potential to hire graphic designers. So you can find them. Now, if I zoom in more, I don't know what the level of detail is here. A couple more levels in, and I say search this area. We'll see if there's any more. Yeah, you see, look, the further I go in, right, the more stuff I find. Now, let me just pick one of these at random. Peace Graphics. It looks like somebody's house, but let's see. Peace Graphics. Now, for every one of these, you can see, first of all, their phone number. Now, if they had a website, it would be listed right here. I guess this is so small that they don't have a website. Let's go to another one just to see if somebody has a website. Here we go. Okay, so here we go. I clicked on this one right here. Capricorn Prince. Now, you've got their name, you've got their website, so I could go right to their website. And if I really wanted to, I could look at their careers section and see if they post any jobs. But I don't really recommend you do that. It's very cumbersome. There's better things you could do. But here's their phone number, all this kind of thing. So what you can do is you can build up like a big, long list of employers near you, like physically, geographically near you, that have the potential to hire someone like you. If you're a graphic designer, you enter graphic design up here, and you're finding a ton of potential employers around you, okay? And you can limit this. You could say, I'm only interested in commuting to the south part of the city. I'm not interested in something way up here. I'm not interested in something over here. Barring remote work, obviously, I'm only interested in the south end of the city, something like that. So you could do that. Now, you have a list of the names of the potential employers, right? The next step, which I'm not going to do live because it involves going into my personal LinkedIn account, would be then you go on LinkedIn, okay? Now, if you don't have a LinkedIn account, get one. It's very quick and easy to do, and it's for free. Okay, and what you're going to be doing is you're going to be entering the names of these companies. So, for example, like what did we have? We had Flower Graphic or something. I can't remember which one we looked at, but whatever it was, like some of these Bioscope Design Studio. Let's say that was one of them. So we're going to go to LinkedIn, and we're going to enter in Bioscope Design Studio into the search box. We're going to do a search for where is it? For this city. I guess the map moved on me here. Yeah, like it just messed up the whole map. But here, I'll just get back in here. You can see I'm using an extremely fast computer. So we're going to enter in the city. We're going to say, I am only interested in search results for this city, that geographic region. And I'm going to do a people search. So the results are individuals, right? So we're going to enter in the name of that company, and we're going to do a people search, and we're going to look inside the company to all the individuals, right? Now you're going to see people, they work at the bottom, they work at the middle, they work at the top. Maybe you see the owner of the company. Maybe you see the head manager of the company, like a CEO or something. Maybe you see the head of the department where you would work for. So if you're a graphic designer, you see someone and they say they're department head graphic design. That's their role. Now, who would you want to talk to? You might want to talk to that person, the head of the graphic design department, right? That might be a good person to contact. And, or you might want to talk to the CEO, depending on the size of the company. I mean, I'm a former CEO. It's not that intimidating. If the company only has 50 people in it, it's like talking to a school teacher in a class. They supervise maybe 30 kids or something. This person supervises ultimately 30 workers, right? 30 employees. So it's not that intimidating. It's not like they're way up there and you're down here. It's like, no, it's like talking to a teacher at school or even the principal, right? And you might want to send them a message. You might want to say like, hey, I'm an incredible graphic designer and I love to do this type of work. I'm very good at doing this type of work. If ever you're looking for someone who could do that type of work for you, let me know, because I know about your company. I know you guys do great work. You're right nearby, and I'd love to work for you. Something like that, right? Now, imagine if you sent that out to, let's go back to this. Like we found, just by entering graphic design, you could enter more things here. You could enter like drafting. You could enter branding. You could enter advertise, things where there's a potential to hire a graphic designer, right? So there's other things too that would reveal even more targets here, right? But we already found like a whole bunch without really trying. The more you zoom in, right? And then you click this button here, search this area, bam. Let's see if it comes up with something else. And just, yeah, there you go. You see, like, look, you would consider some of these. Now, some of these don't look that promising, but you know what I mean? And I haven't done this before, so I don't know what I'm going to get. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, right? So you might want to start with these, or you might want to be a bit more selective. But get on LinkedIn, and then for each of these, you could probably find at least one individual, maybe the owner, maybe several employees, right? But what you're looking for is maybe the hiring manager or a senior manager or the owner, depending on the size. And then you can reach out to them, and there's a variety of ways to reach out to them, right? What I've covered on these live streams is the most obvious basic thing, which is that thing where you just say, hey, I'm here, I do this, and if ever you're looking for that, please let me know, right? There's other things you could do too. You could ask for an information interview. I'd love to get your expert opinion about this industry. Where's it going? Where's it going in the future? That kind of stuff. Would you be able to spare me 30 minutes of your time? You go down and you meet them, right? There's all kinds of things you can do. Then, right, here we go. Okay, so you do all that kind of stuff. And I'm not going to beat this to death. Like, you could really go into it. This is what I go into in that course, by the way, like this kind of thing. And I show you exactly how to do it with templates and processes and whatnot. But I mean, there's a lot of employers out there. The idea is that at any given moment, most of these people will not be hiring, right? But some of them will. Now, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 10%, right? Maybe it's 1%. But the idea is that let's pretend it's 1%, okay, of these people are hiring, okay? So if you send out your message to 100 of these individuals, in every company there's more than one individual, you send that template message out, right? You send that to 100 individuals. On average, you're going to get one person that's going to say, hey, we might have something. Why don't you come down? Let's get together and talk about it. Right? Because they just happened to be hiring for a graphic designer right now, and you fell right in their lap, right? So they're wanting to check you out just to see if there's some potential there, right? So that's like a very, very basic way of getting into the hidden job market. Okay, just by doing stuff like this, you can do it just right from your computer, and then what happens is it's not like a job interview; it feels like a referral because they've asked you to come down. Right? They said, hey, we need someone, and you're someone. Let's talk. It's that kind of thing. It's not like a job interview where you don't really feel welcome a lot of the time, right? So anyway, that's kind of something you can do. This is available. Okay, let's get back to you guys before we go any further with any of this stuff. Where did we leave off? So Guru Prasad says to cold mail. Yeah, this is much more effective than cold emailing people. That's for damn sure. Arn Thor says, I hated interviewing, but by my late 30s, I figured out how to manage my anxiety and make it more of a conversation than an interrogation. But since my return to the process, it has become so much more about weeding out candidates. It just feels fundamentally wrong. Well, you're right. It's about weeding out candidates because, now when they post jobs online, so in the posted job market, you're getting like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of candidates for every job, right? So when you start with like 850 candidates, obviously you're going to have to figure out some way of weeding it down. You have to weed those down to one. Right? That's the job of recruiters. So, that's the name of the game for them from their perspective. But in contrast, if you're doing stuff like I showed off here a moment ago, right, where you're reaching out, and you're messaging different individuals and organizations around you, when you get a bite, when someone responds, they're in all likelihood not talking to anyone else, just you. This is the thing. The competition for the hidden jobs is so much less than when you're competing for posted jobs. Now, I did find something. I talked about this last live stream, and I just want to show it off very quickly, and then I will come back and get to your questions here. So I did another thing where I asked ChatGPT these questions just to see what it would say. This is what it said. So what percentage of jobs are posted? And it said, if you're asking what percentage of all available jobs are publicly posted, the answer can vary, blah, 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 blah. However, research consistently shows that a significant number of job opportunities are never advertised publicly. Here's an overview. Okay, publicly posted jobs. Estimates suggest that only 20 to 30% of available jobs are posted publicly. So what that means is that all the jobs you're seeing, that's only 20 to 30% of all the jobs that are actually out there. Okay? The hidden job market, the remaining 70 to 80% of jobs are part of the hidden job market, which includes opportunities filled through internal promotions or transfers. And by the way, the thing that no one ever talks about for, internal candidates is if you have a vacancy up here, right? And you have an employee here and you move them up into that role, that's great. You now have a vacancy here. So you fill one job, but you create another vacancy that has to be filled. That's the problem with internal candidates, right? There are some advantages to internal candidates. There are some disadvantages, and that's one of the disadvantages. So even if they promote an internal candidate or move them sideways, there's still ultimately a job up for grabs. You know what I mean? That's what nobody talks about. Okay, so they're filled through internal promotions, referrals, and professional networks. This is the kind of thing we're talking about. Direct recruitment efforts, headhunting. Yeah, we don't really see that much of that anymore, except for like executive roles. Employer connections and events through passive candidates. Yeah. Why are so few jobs posted? The cost of recruitment. It's actually very expensive to post a job. That's why employers would rather fill it without going through that formal process where they get the recruiters involved. What they need is they need the sign-off of HR just to make sure that everything legally is done properly. But beyond that, getting recruiters to go out and find candidates for you is very expensive for the hiring manager. So their department or their company, if they're hiring an external recruitment company. Why are so few jobs posted? Cost of recruitment, internal hiring, niche skills, blah, 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 confidentiality. But like this is the big one. So how to access hidden jobs. This is what I'm trying to sort of clue everyone in on if you don't know this. How to tap the hidden job market, networking. Okay? Like it even says LinkedIn here after I've been shouting about it for years. Recruiters, okay, I suppose, but not really. I don't recommend that because they will refer you primarily to posted jobs. Direct applications. Reach out to companies of interest if no roles are listed. And that's kind of what I was describing. You're going to hiring managers. I suppose you could do that, but that's indirect. Okay. I want to get to your questions before I go any further here. Okay. Let's see here. Now, Curran says, watching this while waiting for an informative interview. Waiting to hear back from a couple of full-time jobs, fighting the urge to dwell on what if and keep pressing on. Absolutely, Curran. Yeah, you know what? The mind races and you imagine, all kinds of things. It's well known that in businesses, if you don't communicate to the workforce, to the workers, if they don't hear what's going on, they'll get paranoid and they'll start assuming the worst and imagining the worst. And then the morale goes down, right? So you need to communicate to them to keep them feeling good, right? Now think of your job search process like you mentioned. You're not hearing about what's going on with these jobs you've applied for or these interviews you've gone down for and you haven't heard the result yet. And so in the absence of information of what's going on, like how are these progressing, you always assume the worst. You get stressed out, and it can affect your mental health even, right? So listen, just remember, okay? You are a highly employable person. You are highly valuable. There's a lot of employers out there that would be very lucky to have you as an employee, okay? Now, you know this deep down inside because you've probably had jobs before, right? You were valuable. They kept you around for a purpose. It made sense to them to have you as their employee, and they appreciated you, right? Well, that's who you are, and nothing has changed. You're going to be that again. Just one day, bam, everything changes, and you're an employee again, if that's what you're shooting for. So just remember that, okay? Dave Popovich says, I learned about a new role through networking. This led to a series of really engaging interviews that rapidly progressed. After that, I've heard nothing from the company for over 2 weeks. Thoughts? There's no way to know, Dave. That's just how these things go. Okay. If it was an immediate yes, you would have heard. It's been 2 weeks. That could be a no. That could be we haven't gotten around to it. That could be we're still thinking about it. That could be a key person has gone on vacation and hasn't come back yet. Right? There's no way to know. Okay. Now, I know this is easier said than done. I understand that, but try to not dwell on it and try to focus instead on moving forward. So, this is in the works. Great. Now focus on generating new opportunities for yourself in the meantime. Okay. You have no loyalty to these people yet. Okay. They are acting purely in their self-interest. It would be wonderful if it worked out, but the reality is that you have no obligation to them. They have no obligation to you. They haven't said they're even interested, really. You haven't signed any papers. So keep moving forward until you get like a signed offer, okay? I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but that's the reality, okay? You're going to do okay. You're going to find something, and it's going to work out really well. The only question is, how long is it going to take? I hope it happens soon. I hope this works out. But in the meantime, you've got to focus on the things that you have control over. And in the meantime, you can create some other opportunities for yourself so that even if this ends up working out and they contact you, you have other options. So you'll be negotiating salary from a position of power where you have other options. You don't have to be dictated to by anyone. So it's going to be good, whichever way you look at it. Okay, it's impossible to say what's happening just on an absence of communication. But the only thing we can say is that it's not an immediate yes. PCS brother says, good afternoon, my brother. Am I allowed to say that? Says, does having an MBA or advanced degree, I guess, make the search more difficult? It seems that way if you're not a recent graduate. Yes, it does. In a sense, if you have an MBA, I just went into this 2 days ago on a collaboration live stream I did with a recruiter on this channel. I'm just trying to figure out if I have time to say all this. It can be complicated because you see, there are a lot of people that go out and get an MBA, and then they think that because they have an MBA, they should be the boss, right? And in most situations, that's not true. Because in order to be the boss, you would have to have not only an MBA, but also experience. You need both. You just need both. That's the reality. Okay? And if you have only one or the other, you're at a disadvantage. Okay? But just having an MBA is not the be-all, end-all. And the problem is that the perception is that if you have an MBA, you will not be satisfied in a worker role. So it's almost like they're saying you're overqualified now to get the worker role, but yet you're not qualified enough to be the boss, right? You see how that kind of works? So it's a very tricky situation. So it's a bit of a catch-22. Now, what helps is if you have networking connections, if people know, if you're a known quantity to people, okay? If you're applying through the posted job market, you can encounter this. There are exceptions. For example, if you're hiring with like a big bank or something, where they said like, for this position, you need an MBA, and you have an MBA, it's just like any other worker position, really. That's how they treat it, like in the hiring process. Okay, so there are exceptions, but for a lot of companies where, like, they want you to have an MBA, and they want you to have an MBA because it's a very important position. You're making a lot of decisions that have a lot of responsibility for the organization. And if they get the wrong person in there, you could flush their entire business operation down the toilet if they get the wrong person in there, right? So it's very important that they trust the person that's in that role. And so even if you show up and say, I've got experience and I've got an MBA, that might even not be enough if they don't know you, if they don't know you or know of you. You know what I mean? So there's a couple of ways that can sometimes work out of that situation. One is to sort of take the MBA off your resume or downplay it and get the worker job. And then once you're in, then you say, well, I have an MBA, you disclose that, and I'd like to move up, this kind of thing. And sometimes that'll work. Other times you go the networking route and you reach out to the organization, like I described in this live stream earlier, something similar to that, where they see you on your merits, okay? They realize that a lot of people they know in the business also know you, so you're more of a known quantity, okay? Maybe in a previous job you dealt with people outside your company or something as part of your job, and they know those people, so it's like they're like a reference that they trust, so then you have more credibility for them, and then they'll start trusting you more, so you're not a total stranger, and they'll be willing to consider you. You know what I mean? So there's a lot, I could go on, but there's a lot of facets to this, right? It's complicated. And I know what you feel because I have an MBA myself, and I've directly experienced some of this, but I've also known other people that have MBAs that have experienced a lot more of it, and we've talked about it. So that's where I'm coming from. So I don't know if that helps, but the more you can do with networking, and the more you can do with not having a sort of ego and saying, I'm automatically entitled to be in a management position of great responsibility because I have an MBA, that will be appreciated. That will get you further. It might be true, in some situations, but that attitude will be very off-putting if they perceive that to a lot of places. So whether or not it's justified. You continue. It says, in addition, the interview questions do not match what the posted in the opening. They berate the candidates if you're not what they want. What's the point of view on that? Well, it's just morons, right? You know what I mean? Sometimes they're trying to be very clever and asking unintuitive questions just to see certain things that they perceive as being useful. Other times they're just off their rocket. Like, let's be honest, they're just out to lunch. And they don't know what they're doing, and they shouldn't be in that position. It's impossible to say which. But it would not be the first time we've seen the latter. Okay, that's what I can say. Manny says they even ghost interviews when applying internally. It's a mess. Yeah, it is. It is. And that's also because recruitment and selection is undergoing a bit of some changes right now due to AI, right? So it's creating further chaos. If they weren't disorganized and ill-equipped enough to begin with, now all this recent change with technology is, their jobs are on the block too, and that's creating even more pressures and weird effects. Arnthor says, I really appreciate your live example. Well, thank you, Arnthor. I'm glad it went okay. I'm just doing this stuff right off the cuff. I haven't thought about anything of this in advance. So I'm in some sense I'm going, whew, I didn't have it all blow up in my face or something. But yeah, I have proper examples in my courses and stuff of these things. Manny says, I will start the approach for reaching out to employers. May have better results for strictly limiting to posted jobs. Okay, well, if you know what you're doing, you'll have much better results reaching out to organizations. That's how it works. But it takes a while to learn all that stuff. That's why I put it all in the course. If you want to learn all that stuff from me, check out that course. Curran says, thank you. And I have. Prior to moving across the country this December, I had a full-time job for 4 years. I know I'm qualified. It's just a matter of networking where I am now and meeting people. Yeah, like, sometimes a lot of us white collar people can learn a thing or two from a lot of blue collar people. You know what I'm saying? Because when it comes to networking, a lot of students and stuff, they perceive networking as something that like only, the elites do or something. You know what I mean? Like you have to be like a really accomplished, fancy person to do networking. And it's like, no, you don't. Look at people in the construction business. Like especially, in smaller, like, what do you call it? Like regions, like in a smaller city or a smaller kind of metropolitan area. It's like a lot of them, they all know each other, And when someone, like if you're a drywaller, you do drywall or something, you might know 10 framers, 10 plumbers, 10 electricians, 10 general contractors or more, And so if you get a job, you might have your buddies that you work with, you've worked with a lot in the past. And so you kind of would recommend them. You say, if you're looking for a plumber, I know a guy. I work with him many times. He's very reliable, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like they really have their networking down in some areas, So it's not this thing that only elites do. Like you only have to look as far as, say, the construction industry to see that, right? Now, if you were like a kid in school, maybe you are a young adult, you just turned 18 or 20 or whatever, and you want to get into the construction business, you want to start by doing manual labor or things like that. You show up at a construction site, at 6 a.m. or whatever, and it's like they need people to do manual labor, like just to fetch and carry and this kind of thing. And it's like, you showed up, you're here, you're doing manual labor. Okay, we'll take you. We'll take the first 10 people that showed up that, they look like they can do it. They know what they're doing. Right on. Okay, come on in. It's, you just showed up. It was similar to like direct outreach, that I was talking about earlier, right? It's just on a more blue collar scale, You don't have to get on LinkedIn first, to arrange the meeting and have them invite you in. You just go to them. Instead of like sitting at home and sending in an application to do manual labor, you go show up at the site and say, hey, I got my stuff. I got my hard hat. I got my gloves. I got my boots. I'm ready to go. You're looking for manual labor. I'm here. Do you pay cash or do you want, how do you do it? Whatever's fine. You're like, okay, right on. You're hired. Let's go. That's the foreman. Go do whatever they say. Like, you can see the examples of this. So if you've never done this kind of stuff before, if you open your eyes and you look around, there's plenty of examples where you can observe this. So when I say stuff like the hidden job market and networking, there's a lot of people that like tell me I'm full of crap. I don't know what I'm talking about. The whole thing's a conspiracy theory. The whole thing is based on nepotism and corruption. It's like, it's not. Hey, each to their own. If you want to keep looking in the posted job market and that's it, that's fine. But as we saw here with this business, like 80% of the jobs are in the hidden job market that you access through things like networking, And if you didn't get super high marks in school, or like somebody was mentioning, you got an MBA and you've got a perception problem, or you're changing careers, or you got a work gap, or you have something else where if you're going head to head with 800 other people in a competition, you're not gonna win, right? Because you have that risk factor, right? You can make up for all of those disadvantages by going through networking. And it's not based on corruption. It's based on the fact that you were the only one that showed up. So they picked you first. There might be many qualified people out there, but you're the only one that showed up that day for the job. Who do you think they're going to give it to? They're going to give it to you first, right? Do you think that construction manager posted a job publicly that they're looking for casual labor? No, they didn't need to. Because enough people, plumbers, contractors, electricians, tradespeople of all kinds, they knew about this job. They sent their friends, neighbors, sons, daughters, whatever. There, they said, you go there, you talk to the foreman in the morning when they open, say you're here for casual labor if they need anyone, right? Try to not hang back, try to be towards the front, and then you're in. They didn't need to post the job. They got all the people they wanted, right? That's how this stuff works. It works like that at a blue collar level on the low end. It works exactly like that, certainly at the mid level to high level, you know? And I've built a I built a consulting business doing this kind of stuff with the networking. And I'm an introvert. I got a degree in engineering. I'm an introvert, you know, and not the networking where you have to go to events and stuff, but just like this kind of stuff. Anyway. Okay, let's see. Where did I leave off here? Mr. Good Time says, I was in an hour-long interview, which was seemingly going well. I mentioned how to strive to learn things every day, and the hiring manager quickly replied, everybody does. Somewhat disrespectful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you would not be the first person to encounter some colossal prick or jackass, you know, that's interviewing people for a job. A lot of these people don't have a lot of tact, unfortunately. And, you know, recruiter is an entry-level job. You know that, right? Like, there's a lot of recruiters, like they're entry level. So they get a certificate in HR and then they become a recruiter. Right? And a lot of times it shows. So I empathize with you, Mr. Good Times. There's a lot of idiots out there that are doing a terrible job. And unfortunately, guess who you got to deal with, right? Some of the time you got to encounter these people. But the good news is that they're not all like that. Some of them are actually pretty good, and hopefully you will connect with the good people before long, and that's where they'll see your value, and things will go somewhere. So just keep on keeping on, and you'll find the good people. David says, I reached out to a couple of hiring managers in LinkedIn the same way you mentioned. However, they redirected me to their career section of their website. Yeah, well, it depends. First of all, it depends on the details. If that's what they're doing, then it's a no. You know, it's like, nope, no dice, right? You're going to encounter all types of responses. Some people will say yes, some people will say no. Some people will give you a soft no. Some people give you a rude no. And a lot of other people just won't respond, right? But it's going after that ratio, right? Now, if you said you reached out to a couple of hiring managers, like we're talking a couple being what, 2? Under 10? You got to reach out to a lot, like we're talking at least 100, at least, you know? Because the ratio here is, in all likelihood, they are not going to be hiring for someone with your skills at any given moment, right? It's maybe a 5% chance, 1% chance, 2% chance, depending on your industry and what the role is, right? So the thing is, you know, you're working off that ratio. Now, this is good news because let's pretend it's a 1% chance. You want to get 3 leads for 3 jobs, like where they're hiring and they're considering you first. If it's a 1% ratio, reach out to 300 people. There you go. Of the suitable people we talked about earlier, right? You saw how, like, in the example I gave earlier in this live stream, there's a lot of targets, right? There's a lot of individuals for most jobs. There's a lot more than you think there is, right? So going to 1 or 2, that's useless. You need to go to like 200, 300, 400, 500. Now, considering you can easily do 100 in a day because you're just sending out like a template message, right? It's not hard to do. Anyway, if you want to see how to do that properly, I put all of that into my course. I'm not going to attempt to try and explain every principle here. You know, we'd be here for hours. So hopefully I've given you enough that you understand that this is a thing. Now do your own research into it. Fix the problems with stuff as you encounter them and win. Hopefully that makes sense, Mr. Good Times. Sorry, David. I was talking to David. David, reach out to a couple of hiring managers. Okay, I have reached the end of the chat once again. So I see there's 34 people here. If you have any questions, let me know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. In the meantime, I have to fill time telling you about, first of all, you can join my channel. Secondly, you could check out my other YouTube channels if you're like really, really into me. You can check out my other channels. These are a lot more clips and stuff from live streams where I talk about very specific topics, if you're into that. And of course, if you want to get hired and you really need some help on this, I don't offer personal coaching like somebody was asking earlier, or one-on-one kind of stuff. There's a lot of people that do. If you're looking for like a recruiter or someone to work with you as a personal coach, I mean, you guys might know, I do a collaboration with another YouTube channel every 2 weeks on Monday. We just had our collaborative live stream 2 days ago. You can see it on my channel. It's with a YouTube channel called Life Work Balance, and the recruiter's name is Abby, and she's a former recruiter that's done a lot of stuff, and she does career coaching. And especially for people that, you get interviews, but you can't seem to pass an interview, and you're wondering, like, is there something I'm doing in an interview that, like, is bad? It's hard to be objective about ourselves. My understanding is that, if you do just one session with a career coach, that can really help, like just a one hour session. You do kind of like a mock interview, and and they can give you some feedback, like things like this. So there is a place for that. I don't offer that. I'm not necessarily trying to sell you on somebody else's thing, but if that's what you're looking for and you don't know what's a good place, I've done some stuff with Abby, and I understand she's pretty good at it. So check out her channel, and if that's what you're looking for, and she can help you out with that stuff. For me, I don't have coaching, but I do have courses. It's much better bang for the buck. You're paying so much less money to get the same. I sort of experimented like about 3 years ago doing some coaching. I wasn't super optimistic about it, but it turned out to be kind of what I thought it would be. It's like I'm just repeating myself. The stuff that I put into courses, I just repeat that, a subset of that for people for what they need help with. It just seemed kind of pointless. It's like, just go get the course for a lot less money, and then just, if you follow the course, that would have given you the same result, and it's something you can always come back to, you know what I mean? So I just stuck with courses for the YouTube thing. So check those out. If you're between jobs, get this. This will really help you. Okay. If you just want to learn business, like, to do your job better if you're working, then check that out. And because I'm primarily a business guy, I'm a former CEO. So I did that because I also talk about business, and that's my core competency. But if you're looking to improve your communication skills, check out that one. That's all the stuff I had to learn and tack on in terms of communication skills to go from a worker all the way up to an executive. So if you're interested in that, you can check those out. There's links in the description box under this video. Okay, we got some more activity in the chat here. Let's see. PCS Brother says, I did a catch-22 like you described. I applied for a manager trainee role and was told I was overqualified, but next wasn't qualified enough for the supervisor role. Yeah, so that sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? Whenever you encounter those paradoxes, or however you say the plural of paradox, I don't know what that would be. Whenever you encounter those, that's evidence that you're missing something, right? It's not as simple as what they're letting it on to be, right? Usually, the missing piece for that kind of stuff is the networking component, right? Because whenever there's a manager involved, right, like a true manager, that's where you've jumped from doing to decision making, to thinking, right? You're paid not just to follow instructions, you're paid to decide what's to be done and then give instructions, right? That's the role of a manager. And it's a different thing because you don't necessarily have to trust, you don't have to trust workers the way you have to trust managers. Workers, they're told what to do. If they don't do it, it's pretty obvious. You get rid of them if you can't fix it. Managers, if you have a bad manager that's making bad decisions, they can do incredible damage to the business, right? They can drive away talented employees. Then they can alienate customers, suppliers, regulators, like all kinds of things. They can, do things that have like long-term effects on the reputation of the company, on the brand of the company. Like, so all that stuff adds up to this. They need to trust their managers. They can't just hire strangers and hope that, you should be qualified. It doesn't work like that. You need to earn the trust. That's why a lot of management positions, those people have to put in their time at the organization to earn their trust to be promoted up. They usually don't hire someone that immediately make them a manager. There are exceptions. There are exceptions to that. If you were a prominent manager in another company and, your reputation is beyond reproach, everybody in the local industry has heard of you, and they've interacted with you or they've worked with people that have worked with you, they know your stuff. You were in the role for many years. They verified that. They know that. They respect that. So they're willing to trust you more if they bring you in as an external candidate, right? But for regular people, you got to put in your time. You got to show that you really have the maturity and all the other things you need. You have to have the advanced communication skills. Depending on what level you're at, you also have to tack on things like financial skills, people management skills. There's a lot of things you need besides technical skills. You have to demonstrate that you have all of that, plus you have sound judgment. And the judgment thing is not correlated to having the other things. That's a separate thing. You can have people that have been in their job for years and they know how to manage money, they know how to manage people, blah, 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 but their judgment is just off. They just don't get it, So you have to demonstrate these things. It's not something you can prove you have in a job interview, So that's why there's a need for the hidden job market where you need to hire people that you feel confident in putting them in charge of your baby, your business operation, and having them do a good job where you aren't there to stand over them and see everything they're doing. That's how this stuff is working. So when you say, where was it here? Was it PCS brother? You get these paradoxes. Well, you're overqualified for the training position, but you're not qualified enough for the management. It's like, it's not that you have to go out and get more skills, I'm guessing. It's that they have to know you better. They have to have seen evidence that your judgment is together, that your motivation is there, things like that. How do you do that? You do that by independently reaching out to people, showing, almost like volunteering. Why do people like volunteers that have volunteer experience on their resume? Because it shows that's what you honestly care about. Nobody's paying you to be the volunteer. The only reason you would do it is if you actually enjoyed it or you're passionate about it, right? The problem with jobs is that people pay you for them. So you don't know if the person is really there for the money or they're there because they actually enjoy the work. There's no way to know that, right? Just by looking at their resume or talking to them in an interview. Okay, so it's these principles that are leading to this silly contradictory language that they're telling you, right? You might have stuff on your resume, but they don't trust you. You're an unknown to them. Look at how many employees that they hire don't work out. Now imagine if all their managers, they had the same ratio of managers that didn't work out, like senior managers that really had responsibility. Imagine if the same proportion of them didn't work out. They would destroy those divisions or those departments. That would be the implication. They have to get their managers right, at least managers that have real authority. That's the need for this stuff, and that's why they're saying seemingly contradictory things like this. Raygen says, I feel like I'm a strong interview, but my application and skills may not be as refined. Okay. What job boards, in your opinion, are best? How does one tailor a resume effectively? Oh, God. I can't tell you for job boards. There's a million things out there, and there's going to be industry-specific ones too. So you figure that out. Just do Google searches or ask ChatGPT or something. Okay. How does one tailor a resume effectively? Big topic. I'll give you a summary. Basically, if you're sending your resume for a posted job, that's the assumption here. Because if you're sending it to a hiring manager that you've met, that's a different thing. Okay, it depends what the purpose is of the resume. If you're using it to apply to posted jobs, and it's most likely going to go through an ATS, okay, applicant tracking system, that has AI-based filtering. Okay, so it filters out the resumes or the applications before it even gets to a human, okay? If that's what you're doing, then keywords are key, or key phrases. If they've said that they're looking for certain things in the job posting, make sure you have those, you're speaking to those on your resume, and they're prominent. And you use the same lingo. So if they call it a certain thing, you call it a certain thing, right? The example I've used many times is they call it frontline management experience, which really means supervisor, right? It's the same thing as saying supervisor, but some companies call it frontline management, right? If that's what they call it in the job posting, that's what you call it on your resume, regardless of what your role title was. So if your role title was supervisor, don't talk about your supervisory experience, talk about your frontline management experience, because that's the lingo they're using. So it means the same thing, right? But they're going to be doing a keyword match, and they're only going to be selecting resumes that mention things like frontline management experience, because that's what they ask for. If you don't mention anywhere in your resume, we assume you don't have it, right? So that's how good candidates can get filtered out, So it's all about keywords. Make sure that you speak to all the requirements, and consider taking things off your resume that they didn't ask for, that have nothing to do with the job, right? Because then it just dilutes what you do have, right? So you could be a perfect match if you said that you had these things, right? But if you said you had those things, plus you said you had 25 other things, then you're no longer a perfect match. It kind of seems like you're more like the other things. You're more suited to the other things than to doing this, right? So you could consider doing that. You want to do this these days. You want to use tools like ChatGPT or other AI tools. They will do a fantastic job for you if you know how to use them correctly. And that takes a little bit of practice. Watch some videos on YouTube or whatever that talk about how to do this with the commands, right? And then experiment. And in a very short amount of time, you'll be very efficient at customizing your resume in a very powerful way that will get you interviews for a lot of jobs that you're qualified for. Okay, and you'll be able to do a quantity of them because the AI, like ChatGPT, it does the heavy lifting for you. You always proofread and always do multiple prompts, right? Raygen says, I feel like I'm a strong... I thought I did this one already. That was what I was talking about. Okay, so Raygen says... So hopefully that makes sense, Raygen. Sorry, the other one was highlighted, so that threw me off. Mr. Goodtime says, thanks for your insight. This was a great chat. Well, thank you, Mr. Goodtimes. I'm glad you're getting something out of it. And yeah, we were at the end of the chat again. So get in the chat if there's anybody. There's 34 people here. You guys are still here. So thank you for joining me. Always remember, you're awesome. You're hireable. You're valuable. Don't let these clowns and this process convince you otherwise. There's a lot of people that have mental health issues because, excuse me, man, this is what happens when you talk nonstop for about 3.5 hours. As I struggle to hold myself together, let's see if I can get through this. Guru Prasad says, suggestion, Bill, why wouldn't you start a talent/HR podcasting? Love to hear you grill the industry leaders and get deeper insights. Yeah. Well, thanks for your suggestion. That's very flattering, Guru Prasad. I don't particularly enjoy grilling people over stuff. It's like either I prefer helping people directly. You know, there's a lot of talented people out there that, you know, they could go very far, just they don't have the knowledge. They don't understand how things work. And no one's ever told them how things work. That's the thing that gets me. You know, it's the educational system. You know, I would have thought, in a perfect world, the educational system would prepare people for this. Certainly a lot better than they seem to be doing. But they don't. And I've come to learn that it's because they themselves don't know this. Nor have they really ever taken the trouble to try and learn it. Bring in experts that talk about this. To me, it really feels like they underestimate the value or the intelligence or capabilities of the students. You know, certainly some of them are kind of not very bright and kind of immature, fair enough, but that's not everyone. There's a lot of more mature, you know, people that are very, very bright. Just because they're like, you know, in high school or whatever, it doesn't mean they can't understand the stuff. And how are you supposed to know it if no one ever tells you, you know? Especially in this day and age where a lot of young people have trouble finding jobs and things like that. It's a real challenge. You know, it's like, it just seems to me like this is stuff where you'd want to really, you know, provide them with knowledge, and they do a terrible job at this. Absolutely terrible. You know? Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, like an eon ago, and they had like guidance counselors and stuff like this. And it's like, those people could not have been more useless, you know, at least in my case. This is just anecdotal for me, but it was like embarrassing how absolutely useless they were. I remember like asking a guidance counselor, just something like basic, like saying like, I would like to go to the local university to study this. What grades and courses do I need to go into that program? And they gave me misinformation. Instead of saying, I don't know, but maybe I'll try and find out, they gave me a pile of misinformation. Oh, you need this and this and this and this. It was all completely wrong. It almost completely sabotaged me in going to university, because being a young, innocent high school person, I just sort of like took them at their word. You're the adult and I'm the teenager. And I just, you know, this is your job. I assume you know what you're talking about. Man. And I think that's when it started for me, you know? It's like being skeptical of the official sort of line, you know? And instead demanding more proof, more evidence. And that served me well over my career, like, you know, that attitude. You know, just having critical thinking skills, not just accepting something because someone says it. You know, go out and verify that. If that's something you're going to base your future career on or something, I want to see some evidence that that's valid. You know, I'm not just going to take the word of a stranger who might have a conflict of interest, you know, as truth, you know, as fact. There might be more to the story, and there usually is, you know? So that's what I'd recommend to everyone out here, just for your own, you know, for your own benefit. And your own security, you know, corroborate a lot of things. And the best evidence that something is true is if you yourself see it or do it. Instead of like listening to different advice from people, you go out and you accomplish that yourself, or you see it with your own eyes. Then no one can tell you that like you're wrong. No one can tell you it can't be done if you've done it. You know what I mean? You know, I've done videos recently in the last year where I've talked about like this attitude that I've seen in a lot of young people. Now, look, we've all been young, and you know, I'm not putting down young people, quite the opposite. You see, they've been conditioned, perhaps understandably, to always conform, to always listen to what the teacher says, to accept what the teacher says is true, you know, and ask for permission before you do anything. You can't just go and do that. We have rules about that. You have to ask permission, you know. Now, okay, fair enough. I understand why you have those. However, the problem is that when you grow up and you get out into the real world, you've got young people, maybe in their 20s, and they're stuck in this mentality of like, I can't just do that. Someone has to give me permission before I can do that. And it's like, what? Whose permission do you need? You're an adult. You don't have a boss. You don't have a teacher. You know, go and do it, you know? What do you mean you can't talk to this person? What do you mean you're not allowed to go and do? Allowed by whom? You know? And it's like, so when I say like, you know, for example, you can get a job by doing direct outreach to companies, stuff you could find a ton of evidence that, you know, not from me, that this is a real thing that most people get hired through. You know, it's like a lot of young people don't believe me when I say this. Surely you can't do that. And then they say, well, who am I to talk to them? Well, who do you have to be to talk to them? You know, I was a CEO. These people are like managers. Who do you have to be to talk to them? You know what I mean? You know, they're not this like fearsome, godlike person that you seem to be acting like. You know, if you approach them professionally, appropriately, you know, you're polite, you're friendly, you ask for something reasonable, you know, it's going to go well, unless you just draw the short straw and you happen to, you know, encounter an idiot. And most people aren't idiots, but you do get a few of them, you know? And it's like, the thing that I keep wondering is like, why isn't somebody teaching these kids this? Like these people in their 20s, why are they just having to learn this the hard way? Some of them never learn it and they suffer for it. You know, either they're unemployed for long periods of time, or they're not in a job that they could get. They're in this other job, which is like a sort of fraction of, you know, what their capabilities are, you know? A lot of it is self-serving. People don't want to let young people in because they want to keep it for themselves. A lot of it is just laziness or ignorance. There we go. I'll get off my soapbox. Anyway, I appreciate the suggestion, Guru Prasad, about the whole podcast thing. To be honest with you, I don't have the technical skills to set that up for myself. I'm sure it's really easy, but I don't listen to podcasts myself, so I'm not tuned into that. You know what I mean? That's just how things go. I'm an old guy, so I'm not down with the latest stuff. Rebirth says, I'm 41 years old. I got laid off recently. I'm sorry to hear that, Rebirth. Most jobs say age not over 35 years. I feel I could not get any more job. Once again, yes, you can. They're talking about posted jobs. But if you tap the hidden job market, that's where all the majority of the jobs are. The great thing is the way you do that is you go around the HR organization to get those jobs. You go directly to the hiring managers. You can get them. This is another example. Like I said, it's the equalizer for people who are changing careers, for people that have work gaps, for people that, you know, they want to get into management, but they're an unknown quantity. They don't have any connections, so, you know, that's keeping them out. Like all kinds of liabilities, right? You're over 35 years old. Oh my God, that must mean you're useless, right? What crap? You know? There's plenty of opportunities for you, Rebirth. That's the good news. The bad news is that you have to learn an entirely different way of getting a job, right? Okay, learn all you can. There's a lot of resources out there for you, and you have two eyes, you have two hands. You can observe what's going on. You can also try stuff yourself, okay, at the end of the day. Get your advice from a lot of different sources, not just me, a lot of different people, okay? Make sure that they don't have a conflict of interest. So remember, it's hard to get a recruiter to advise you that you don't have to go through a recruiter to get a job. You know what I'm saying? Look for conflicts of interest. I'm not a recruiter. I'm a former CEO. I've hired recruitment companies to do recruitment for me, and I've worked with recruiters, and I've hired people directly myself. But you know what I'm saying? It's like I'm coming from a different perspective than recruiters. Now, I've showed some stuff in this live stream, okay? Things like this. I just asked ChatGPT, okay, what percentage of jobs are posted? And it says the reality, which is that only 20 to 30% of jobs are publicly posted. That means everything that you see, that's only 20 to 30% of the jobs that are out there. The remaining 70, 80% are part of the hidden job market. Okay, you get it basically through networking. Okay, if you are an extrovert, you can do extroverted networking. You can go to events, you can go and meet people, all that kind of stuff. You can do cold calling, whatever. But if you're an introvert like me, okay, there's a lot of other things you can do that are very, very effective. And I've shown some of them on this live stream today. And the one that I did earlier today, I showed off a slightly different thing. Okay, so look into that. There's a lot of jobs out there. They're in the hidden job market. That means it's very informal how you get those jobs. Okay, you know, and you get the job not because you went up against 800 people and beat them as being the most qualified. You get the job because you're the only one that showed up. That's why they offer it to you, right? Now they're hidden. They're looking at maybe one or two people for each of these jobs, and that's it. So when you show up and you show up first, you're the prime candidate, right? And let me tell you something, they're not going to have a problem that you're over 35 for a lot of things. Okay? So here, look. This is stuff I didn't have a chance to get to today. Of the 20% of jobs that are posted, what number of job seekers are competing for them? The majority of job seekers tend to focus on publicly posted jobs, right? So even though it's only 20% of the jobs that are out there or so, okay, most people are competing for those jobs, right? Estimates suggest that 75 to 85% of job seekers primarily focus on applying to the 20 to 30% of jobs that are publicly posted. There you go. That's one of the reasons why it's so damn tough when you go purely for posted jobs, okay? The bottom line is, what do you need to do? Does it get to that? It's basically like here. This is what I'd recommend. I wouldn't put it like this, but diversify your job search. Combine applications to posted jobs with networking and direct outreach. Absolutely. Do direct outreach for sure. And then there's other things in the umbrella of networking that you could do. Even if you're an introvert that don't feel terrible, they actually feel pretty damn good because you can do it from the comfort of your own home with a computer. You can generate all kinds of opportunities directly just by knowing what to say, how to say it, and how to convey that message to somebody. Okay? And to whom it should go and how you discover them. Okay? So learn all this stuff. Now, one way or another, just learn it. That would be my recommendation. And then there's a whole cornucopia of opportunities that opens up. Okay, there's a lot of things out there. I'd like to think I demonstrated a piece of that today when I was showing you guys this business, right? Like all the stuff we did like an hour ago in this live stream. Just something simple like graphic design, just looking at a tiny piece, like look at all the employers that are near you that have the capacity to hire someone with your skills. You can discover that very quickly. And there's a ton of opportunities around there, a lot more than you think. And if you pursue those, like the way that I'm recommending. If you want to go deeper with that, I got two things. First of all, there is a video that I've linked to in the description box. It's a free video on my YouTube channel. Actually, there's two videos. One's called Hidden Job Market. The other one is called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay? How Successful People Get Jobs. There's a link to it in the description box. Go watch that video. That'll show you more of the process I kind of demonstrated already this live stream. And that should give you ideas, okay? Now, if you do want to learn all of this stuff with me, if that's what you're wanting to do, I've got a course where all of that stuff is there. That's where I put all my advice. It'll help you get posted jobs, and it will help you get hidden jobs. Okay, so check that out. It's geared primarily for introverts like myself, and I'm sharing a tactic that I've done for years that I built a consulting business through. So I've done all this. I've walked the talk, and I know what I'm talking about. So check that out if you're interested. No pressure. But if you're really needing some help on this and you like my version of it, check that out. Okay, so that's this course right here. I also have this one on how to learn business, the best bang for the buck around. And I also have this. If you're wanting, you know how to get a job, but you're wanting to improve your communication skills, make yourself a candidate for being promoted into a management role. If that's what you're looking for, this course is like all the stuff I had to learn from being a worker to being essentially the CEO, being an executive. I had to tack on other things too, like financial management skills, people management skills, but communication skills is a big one, and that's what that course is. That's like all that stuff all in one place. So it's called Write Like a Professional. It is about writing, but it's mainly about what to say, how to respond. So if you're interested in that, check that out. Both of these are quite popular courses, actually. So there's only so much I can say on live streams. Like, when I'm trying to answer everyone's questions, there's a limit to how deep I can get into stuff. As you can tell by how fast I talk and I do the motor mouth thing, there's so much detail. It's impossible to really get into it here. So I put it into courses. So there you go. So best of luck, Rebirth 2526. You will succeed. It's just a question of how much time is it going to take, but you're awesome and you're highly employable and you're going to find something. And being over 35 is not a crime, and that's not reflected in the world of employers, despite what you might have heard. Reese says, is now bringing a copy of my resume a bad idea? They know I changed careers and don't have relevant experience, but are bringing me in to the interview anyway. Is not bringing copies. Sorry, I can't see what I'm typing before I send it in. I don't understand what you're saying. Is not bringing copies. Yeah, okay, I read it the right way, coincidentally anyway. No, I don't see why. Listen, if you're going for an informational interview, bringing a resume to an informational interview is a faux pas, because the idea is that you're not there for a job. You're there to just learn something, right? Now, if you happen to have a copy of your resume with you and you just whip it out, here you go, that's kind of suspicious. That means you're thinking about getting a job, and that's maybe what this really is about, right? And you don't want to, let's face it, even if that is kind of what you have in the back of your mind, you don't want to convey that impression, right? So don't bring resumes to an informational interview. For a job interview, bring as many copies of your resume as necessary. Usually, having a couple of extra copies is not a problem. If some job interviews, they're kind of chaotic. You get people just sitting in on them, just on the spur of the moment kind of thing. And they might not have a copy of your resume and say, here, I got extra copies if anyone needs it, right? Have a copy of your own resume in front of you as a default. If you're doing a face-to-face interview, they're on one side of the table, you're on the other, If you're doing a virtual interview, it doesn't really matter, but you know what I'm saying? Like just a face-to-face interview. I've never heard that that's any kind of disadvantage. That's stupid. Now, if you're like forcing it on them or doing anything weird like that, then that's something else. Patrick H says useless. Okay, well, whatever that means. Cat Girl says, do you think using a functional resume can really make a big difference? I was told to change to one. It depends. I mean, it depends what the purpose is. I did a video on functional resumes like a long time ago. For some types of management stuff, it's certainly a thing, but and the other thing I've heard recruiters say that like, oh, if you're coming out of school, and you don't have any real work experience, maybe a functional resume would be more appropriate because it's not about like the list of jobs you've had, in which case you'd have a very short list. It's more about what you can do. I can do this, I can do that. So that's the other usage case I've heard proposed for a functional resume. Like I paid like somebody like years ago, like 15, 20 years ago, I paid somebody like 4 figures, like a professional resume writer that works with like Fortune 500 CEOs and stuff. I paid them to do my resume, and they did like this fancy sort of hybrid resume that was like half functional, half chronological, with all kinds of bar graphs and crap like that on it. And that worked for me, like for what I was trying to do. I was trying to get senior executive type roles, and I did get those roles. But like if you're going for like a role through a recruiter for like a worker, I don't think functional is really what they're looking for in most cases. You know what I mean? Because what's the big metric that recruiters always look for? They look for years of experience, right? They stupidly measure everything in terms of years of experience. So you've got 5 years of experience, you've got 7 years of experience, therefore you're clearly the better employee. It's like, that's crap. But that's how they think because they have no idea about the subject matter of the jobs they're hiring for, right? So, if that's how they think and they get a resume that has no like years of experience on it anywhere, no dates, no years, they might balk at that. It seems to me like that wouldn't be the thing you would go to. So maybe a hybrid resume where like, the first half of the first page is more like functional. You list in point form what you can do, what you've done, maybe if it ties in with their keywords, but then the rest of it is a chronological resume where you have dates and years, duties and accomplishments for each job. That might satisfy both, like that might give the recruiters what they're looking for, and maybe give you like, a little bit of a thing that, maybe it helps with keyword matching for ATS, but it also can speak to a human if they're like looking at your resume and they just want to see like in 5 seconds or something what you've done. You can highlight like some bullet points at the top, right? I know Abby, the recruiter from Life Work Balance, that YouTube channel, I collaborate with her like every couple of weeks on a live stream. I know she recommends that. You have bullet points at the top that basically speak to the requirements, right? So it just grabs the eye when a human looks at it. That might make a lot of sense. So that's what I'd say about it. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but you're welcome, Rebirth. Mohammed says, I'm not sure why the link for the writing course is not working. Oh, isn't it? I can't say. It should be working. You should be able to click on it and it would take you. There's 2 links. The one is the actual course. The other one is it takes you to a video where I answer frequently asked questions about the course. So there's 2 kind of links there. You know what? I am going to very briefly just verify that for you right here. If I can. Okay, so this is the course. That's the URL. Okay, so thecompaniesexpert.podia.com. Okay, and then this is the course. Like if that's the one you're talking about, right? For the writing course, that's the writing course. Okay, so it's up and it's running, and that's the URL. So I'm not sure if that helps. Okay, Mohammed says, I want to ask you, what does the salary range mentioned in the job cover? Is it basic pay or with allowance and benefits? Well, that's going to vary. It depends on the job, right? But usually it's not the benefits. Okay, that's separate because benefits are defined as anything that isn't cash, right? Anything other than direct cash with no strings attached, right? So the benefits are separate from they're over and like any benefits you get are over and above the pay as they like the number that they put on a job posting. Okay. Now, allowance, or, I don't know what exactly you mean by allowance, but, there's various levels of pay depending on what your role is. Like, you'll have like base pay, you might have performance pay, and then performance pay, there's different levels of it. You can have like, a personal short-term bonus, like you get a bonus every year, based on like the work you do. You can get performance pay based on a group, like a work group, or even the performance of the company, right? Then you can get other forms of compensation. You get benefits. You can also get equity, like shares, and then you can get things like options and stuff like that. There's all kinds of things on there. There's also other extra stuff like signing bonuses and stuff like that, where they like give you a check on basically day one. They say, here's $5,000. It's not your salary. This is a one-time only thing. You only get it once, but it's like a sort of, welcome aboard type thing. Sometimes you can't get them to budge on salary if you try and negotiate, but you can get them to give you like a signing bonus, like a one-time only thing. It's a very complicated topic, salary negotiation. Compensation in general is very complicated. Okay, I used to teach a course called Total Compensation in university, and like it was an entire course on compensation. We barely scratched the surface. We didn't even talk about like executive compensation, things like that. This is just for workers, and you know what I mean. So when you see a job posting, it'll most likely be like base pay, right? But it's going to vary, and depending on what country you're in, there may be different laws saying they have to disclose this or that. So you may want to ask them, but don't do it until you get an offer. Like if you don't get an offer, none of this matters. So get an offer first, and then you can start asking about this stuff, okay? If you start asking a lot of questions about compensation, like right off the hop, they'll probably eliminate you because it really looks like you're just in it for the money. You don't care about the job or the company. And you don't want to make that impression. Cat Girl Blue says it's because there's a big gap in my work experience. Oh, I see. Okay, like the functional resume. You could try it. Listen, I honestly don't know. It depends what you're trying to do. It depends what the gap is, and how receptive these people are to a functional resume. So try it and just see if you get any bites. But remember that if you're dealing with recruiters, they want to see dates. They want to know years of experience. Now, if you have a work gap, okay, the way to get rehired with a work gap, like say you took time off to deal with a sick family member, or to have children, you had young children and now they're grown and now you're ready to rejoin the workforce, whatever. Usually the way people get hired in those cases is they go through networking, right? It's much better. Don't be freaked out if you don't know much about networking. It's actually much, much easier, much better. Okay. You reach out to companies and do it that way. If you know what to do, it's really not a big deal. But the idea is that they get to know you, they get to like you, they're impressed by, you're not talking about how good you are, you're showing them how good you are. You're the one that showed up. You're the one that's showing enthusiasm. You're the one that showed initiative to do this. They're getting a free sample of how professional you are, how likable you are. When you talk shop with them, it's clear you know your stuff. You're demonstrating all this, and that's why it's a much better way to get the job. The hiring manager will say, yeah, hey, I can tell you would be able to do this. So the only question then is, do they have a job right now for someone like you? And, that's always going to be a ratio. Maybe 5% of the people have, maybe 2%, maybe 1%, but it's always a ratio. So anyway, I talked about all this like a couple of times earlier this stream, so I'm not going to get back into it. But check it out. If you want to learn that stuff with me, I have some free videos on it. I also have this. All of it is right here. A subset of it is in free videos. The whole meal deal is right here if you want to learn that from me. But either way, go out and learn it, okay? Usually, that's how people change careers. That's how people get work gaps, overcome work gaps. In both cases, you have issues with years of experience for a role, right? but you can overcome the whole years of experience thing in both cases. Okay, there are 34 people here. It's been an hour and a half, so I'm probably going to wind this thing up. Thank you for being here. I wish you nothing but the best. Always remember, you're awesome, you're hireable, you're valuable, you're going to make a great employee. Right now, out there right now, is an employer who's looking for someone exactly like you. It's just that you're missing each other in the fog. You're looking over here, they're looking over there, and there's no connection between you, okay? So take heart. This is a very demoralizing process. It's where we feel like about this tall. It's a real shot to everybody's self-esteem when you're between jobs. Especially a lot of people that see themselves as providers, right? You feel about this tall, and it's hard when you feel like this at this point for you to go out and put on a brave face and act all confident and, self-assured and try and put yourself forward for jobs. It's very challenging. A lot of people struggle with it. If you're struggling with it, you are not alone. And, but always remember, you've had jobs before, I'm sure. You were a great employee. You are obviously valuable. That's who you are. You're going to be that again. It's just a question of how much time it's going to take. Okay? Learn all you can. I do these live streams like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Come back and ask questions if that would help you, if I can help you. But keep moving forward. Take care of your mental health. Do something fun. Force yourself to do something fun on the weekends or something, just to just for your own mental health. And, you'll get through this. Don't worry about it. Right on. Okay. So thank you very much. I will be back on Friday. I got 2 live streams on Friday. One that talks about private equity and stuff. You guys probably were not interested, but I had another edition of Honest HR Nitrous on Friday if you want to come back. Thanks very much. Check out my courses. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.